So the first thing on the agenda is the approval of the September 3rd minutes of our last meeting. Do I have a motion to approve it?
I move to approve it.
Okay, and a second?
Second.
Okay, any
Can't get the
discussion?
unmute button.
Any discussion? Okay. All on our CAC committee that are for approving it, say aye.
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 Anybody that wants to not approve it? Abstain? Okay. The motion is passed. And now let's get to the nitty gritty. Andy, would you like to talk a little bit about the Bell Station land and where DEC stands, et cetera?
Sure, and I will recount the history as I know it, so others chime in who may know parts of the history as well. The Bell Station property, which is 490 approximately acres with 3,500 feet of shoreline, is to my knowledge the largest undeveloped privately owned parcel of shoreline in all the Finger Lakes. So we have identified that one of the priorities, most threatened lands for the land trust is shoreline. So this, we've been exploring possibilities of the future of that land for at least 15 years. At some point, when NYSEG, before it was owned by Avangrid, they actually had a partnership with DEC to manage a cooperative hunting program. So within DEC, there's an institutional history still of familiarity with that land. As NYSEG was downsized, that program went away, but there's been a state interest in acquiring the property for some time. This is in the state open space plan by name, and not sure, one of you may know the exact, time flies, but the previous regional director and I, Ken Lynch of DEC, met with two successive town boards, first a Democratic majority board, but then followed by a Republican majority board to secure support for the concept of establishing a state wildlife area on the land. Of course, if Avangrid and NYSEG were going to sell it. That endorsement was contingent on payments in lieu of taxes. And what's important is state wildlife areas don't typically pay taxes. State forests do, but to be designated a state forest, you need 500 acres. That's by the statute. So we then have courted NYSEG and Avangrid, and who've been kept things close to the vest of their future plans, which presumably is to divest at some point. But we've always had these two fixed reference points of town of Lansing needs the payment in lieu of taxes. In order to do that, you need 500 acres. And we figured we could get the 10 needed acres from a neighbor. And then what caught our attention was the solar proposal and the desire to utilize potentially approximately 200 or more acres of what is agricultural land. For those who may not be familiar, about half of the Bell Station property is wooded, shoreline, and bluff, and about half is leased corn and soybeans, maybe some hay. In any event, I have had conversations with several folks in Lansing because the thought crossed my mind, well, one is, what does the community feel about this? But two, typically large solar farms have a significant host benefit compensation package. And there's a fundamental question is, if the town supported a solar farm that included the fields, would it feel differently about the necessity of having payment in lieu of taxes on the shoreline, which would now be difficult, if not impossible, if you don't have the couple hundred acres that the solar folks want. At the same time, I have already been reaching out within DEC, within the agency, to see if the town of Lansing supported this concept and was comfortable with the idea of having the shoreline, a smaller acreage, say approximately 250 acres off the tax rolls, but recognizing there might be a significant income stream from the solar project, would the state still want to own and commit managing it? Those internal discussions are going on right now. So from our perspective, we've a letter from the state that should there be a meeting of the minds, we're able to act as their agent with NYSEG or Avangrid to try and facilitate a deal. But it very much depends on carrying out the wishes of the community. And so in this case, there's this new wrinkle where if the community supports solar on the fields and is willing to forego revenue, but thinks it can be made whole with the solar revenue. And if DEC, that's okay, there's a potential win-win of accommodating solar and generating revenue on what are now agricultural fields, but securing the lakefront as a conservation area and recreation area. The last piece too, there is a possibility of incorporating some land, a modest amount of woodland on the Milliken Station property. If you look at a map, you can see that there's some undeveloped hillside woods that are contiguous to the wooded area of Bell Station that are really not a great site to put solar. That potentially, if the Cayuga operating folks were agreeable, could be made part of the public recreation area. So again, we're exploring all these options. First and foremost, it depends what the town of Lansing wants, but there are a couple, these two different potential paths.
So do you have any idea what the tax rate would be for a solar farm as opposed to an agricultural field?
I do not. I think it's significantly more, and I think that may be negotiable.
My understanding, Tom, is that the Public Service Commission is currently reviewing these rules. They're going to have a public comment on it, I think November 2nd. I'm happy to send along the details, but right now they're proposing a per megawatt payment directly to the town for solar project of $500 per megawatt. Wind is considered, I guess, I don't know, more difficult. So that's going for $1,000 per megawatt. But these are just in draft right now. So if everyone here is interested, I'm happy to circulate that information. I sent it to the town board and planning board recently, but it was also like a wall of text to try to get through. So anyway.
This is Karen. I wanted to know whether if it were designated, I think you're saying a wildlife management area, would that be require that there was mandatory hunting on it, or is that something that is negotiable?
Whether it was, my understanding is whether it was designated a state forest or a wildlife management area, in either case, there would be hunting on the property. That's my general understanding. I haven't specifically asked that, but I believe it to be true in either case.
I wonder, CJ, do you have a map you could throw up that would help at least me, more clearly see that designation between the Bell property and the other properties, and then to visualize what Andy is talking about?
Sure. Actually, Karen Edelstein here from the Conservation Advisory Council recently prepared a really lovely version of the map. So let me just put that up for you. All right. There we go. Hopefully you can see that. And this yellow area, and Karen could go into more detail on it, of course, but this approximately these yellow lines right here that I'm tracing with the cursor represents the parcel boundary of that particular tax parcel.
Andy, do you know if that green area that Cayuga Power owns, is that the forest land you're talking about that they may be willing to part with?
Correct, because I think because of slopes
Mhm.
and the notion of clear cutting a wooded hillside, I don't think that is, in past conversations with them, they were not thinking that's what would be optimal. And
Mhm.
I should mention, would want to do a detailed site analysis. For example, there are fields on the lakeward closest to the lake that I would want to look at, and the recommendation at this time of whether perhaps some of those fields should be retired or not made into a solar farm. So it's not an all or none proposition, but I think their interest is up towards Lake Ridge Road. It's very level, very open. That's their particular interest. You go to the left side where you see the 8.29 acres. I would want to give a close look at those fields to before making a recommendation of whether they should be incorporated into a wildlife area, whether it's field or woods, or potentially made part of a solar project.
Could you just say again, which part would be the solar project? Is it basically what looks like the fields right now?
All I know is what was reported in the paper. So I've had no contact with the solar developer. And I don't know if CJ, you have more information, but I think it's probably pretty conceptual at this point.
Yeah, I would say so, but that's my understanding, at least, that they'd want to try to use as much of the flat area, like he was saying.
I think the key is that I think that we wouldn't want to spend a lot of time exploring this if the town was still looking for tax payments from the frontage, because we know that would be impossible as soon as you reduce the acreage substantially. So I think there's all kinds of scenarios and that would require a lot of analysis and discussion with all the parties. But the key question at a threshold level is if it goes below 500 acres, it would be very difficult for the state to make payments in lieu of taxes. And then it's a question of whether balancing revenue from the solar development and versus foregoing revenue from the state payment in lieu of taxes.
This
So
is Dave.
Go
If
ahead.
I could just clarify just a little bit what your group who spent a lot of time working on this, thinking about this, is proposing. So are you envisioning a kind of a win-win situation where there can be some solar development and then also getting this 500 acres that we need, or foregoing one or the other? What exactly are you proposing? Did your group kind of come to the conclusion
What I'm suggesting is a recreation area probably on the neighborhood of 350 acres, and then accommodating solar on the portion of property, including Cayuga Power property, but also including the portion of Bell Station that's closest to Lake Ridge Road, and with the exact details to be worked out. But rough numbers thereabouts. So not a 500 acre conservation area, but probably in the order of 350.
And so that means it would miss that threshold for a certain kind of tax revenue for the town. Is that
correct? And
yeah.
I do not have the information to compare what is not huge revenue from a state forest scenario versus what a solar farm would pay. So I think that really definitely requires further exploration and information.
Yeah, so the town might feel like they're getting some new revenue via this solar project and could forego some of that potential tax revenue of having with the 500 acre kind of threshold.
Yeah, it's possible using that portion of the property would exceed, that the revenue flow would exceed what the state would have paid for state forest land.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So if it's a wildlife management area, you can't have a pilot program with that?
The only way you can is by special legislation. And the challenge, it's not impossible, but your Senate district includes the Northern Montezuma Wetlands Complex, which has a lot of wildlife land off the tax rolls. So it would be very difficult politically to do legislation for Lansing and not the poor towns of Savannah and where there's extensive acreage. And the minute you do that, there are a lot of other communities in the state that are also seeking the same thing. So it's not impossible, but it's very difficult. And back when Senator Nozzolio was in office, he said there's no way he could do Lansing and not the rest. And he thought the feasibility was dubious. And I would say that probably hasn't changed. Not just because of the district, but once you do that, many other jurisdictions in the state who absolutely want the same thing. And this is the state's kind of Byzantine system or lack thereof for payments in lieu of taxes has created all kinds of inequities and issues across the state. And it would be very difficult for one community to tackle this without everyone else trying to get involved.
Okay.
Yeah, Tom, I was just going to mention that if you're looking at that parcel from a solar perspective in terms of its build out in that way, if you were they would probably end up with something like, and maybe Rob can speak to this a bit better, but if you're looking at 35 acres of solar, or I'm sorry, 35 megawatts of solar development there, even at the low price that the Department of Public Service staff is currently proposing for just the host community agreement, that's a payment of $17,500 a year directly to the town, as well as a pilot for that, which the town gets just a sliver of a pilot. The town only receives 5% of a pilot versus a host community agreement. This is a payment directly to the town. So, but we can certainly do the math on it. It should be pretty straightforward. The valuation of the parcel currently is 1.97 million. Which NYSEG pays.
I mean, the $500, I haven't been following that as specifically, but I can ask some of my policy folks about it in terms of where they think that may land. But that seems incredibly low to me, quite frankly, for what the economics of a system, particularly as large as what they're contemplating. I would have to say that I personally think that they have, to hit at least 100 megawatts in to make this project make sense for them. So even in that scenario of, getting to 35 across these two properties, there's significantly more land, right, in Lansing that they would need.
I was just mentioning this particular parcel. Yeah.
Yeah, in addition to all of this. The question I was going to ask is, what is, I guess I'm not as familiar, forgive me, with how the pilot applies in the case of the, I believe you said wildlife management option. So if the lake, sort of the forested portion were aggregated, if you will, the sort of large chunks were aggregated across the two properties. The concept, just to make sure I understand this, is to have the state take ownership, and the state would then pay a payment under a pilot to the town for taking ownership of that property, and a pilot for the taxes on it to the town. Is that, Andrew, what I'm understanding?
Just to back up from the get-go, one of the reasons the land trust is not proposing that we acquire it, even at the money as a preserve, is given the nature of the property, the attractive waterfront, the level of use, we believe that whoever owns and manages should have a direct connection to law enforcement and police powers. There are people who have been squatting on there in the past. That's It's
Sure.
a capability as an absentee owner we're not in a position to do. So the state has it has a number of land use categories. State parks, different agency, but they don't pay taxes. State wildlife areas, with a few exceptions, don't pay taxes. State forests, I think because the program was set up probably, years and years ago, but the notion is generating revenue from cutting trees. That type of land, which if you go south of Ithaca, one side of the valley is state forest, the other is wildlife area. They look exactly alike. One makes payment in lieu of taxes, one doesn't. It's a quirk of the category. Because
Got it.
state wildlife areas, they'll also cut trees, but it's just a quirk of the category system. So the issue is, to be a state forest, you have to have 500 acres or more. So we gotten the feedback from the town of Lansing that we won't support this proposal unless you make payment in lieu of taxes. Even though it was the DEC wildlife people interested, they were creative in thinking, well, we'll make it a state forest, even though really it's the wildlife guys that want it. And it was totally driven by this payment in lieu of tax issue. So if the whole notion is that if a portion of the property becomes used for solar and is not part of the state holdings, the management would probably be very similar, but the state would not make the payments in lieu of taxes because they can't. It's not 500 acres.
Got it. Okay, thank you. That's really helpful. So in that, has anyone ever discussed a scenario where, let's say the solar S-Power acquires Bell Station, and in the land deal that they do with Cayuga Power, that the town of Lansing takes over ownership of all of the forested lakefront land? I mean, would that be a scenario that the town would ever entertain, so that it has the sort of authority over it for policing?
That's a question for the town. No one from the town has ever expressed that interest to date, because there's more the liability and the management questions of it. But that's a question for the town.
This is, have you, oh, sorry, Rob, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, I mean, that's not an entirely uncommon scenario. And in my experience from developing similar projects like this in other parts of the country, where, it's often sort of a requirement that's put on the developer, particularly in very large developments like this, where they're acquiring, agricultural or, let's say property that's suitable to build solar farms, that includes buffer land that is not. And that land is then given to the local municipality for the creation of a park, if you will, for lack of a better term, in perpetuity, as a part of the sort of overarching, benefit agreement with the town that includes the pilot component as well. So, I mean, I think in this case, it could be something that maybe the county even has an interest in, to that end, if our goals are, as the town, not so much to necessarily benefit from what sounds like, personally, some measly amount of pilot money, but rather a very large, portion that's preserved in some kind of, use category that preserves it as wild space. But I don't know, that's just the only thing that comes to mind that we may want to look at.
Well, I had
Go ahead.
moving beyond, and I didn't want to divert Rob's idea, but I didn't hear anybody pick up on it. So I had a sort of a different question. With Andy's proposing maybe 350 acres of recreational in Bell Station. So have you all looked at getting 150 acres off the Cayuga Power land to the south? It looks like they're not used. There's 150 acres there that they're not using. So add that to 350 and you get your 500 for the state forest. That's my question.
It's possible, I guess, we have talked to them in the past, and I think there's an opportunity. It really depends. I'm looking at Karen's map where there's, it looks like 96.7 acres of forest, and I still come up a little shy, but it depends on how much solar, how much. So that you're right, that's a possibility of saying, well, just in round numbers, if you have 100 acres up by Lake Ridge Road in solar, you probably could make 500. But if they want 200 or more, I think it might be difficult to make the 500. But you know, it's wouldn't rule it out. It would require more analysis.
Yeah, it would certainly require more analysis. I think that purple, which is labeled industrial, which is past the yellow line to the north, I don't know that they're using that or need it. But again, I agree, it needs further analysis. But I think there's a possibility there to somehow get the 500 by putting them both together.
This does factor, though, again, presuming not the town of Lansing is owner, the DEC, and they have an opinion too. And I think they have been reluctant to take on some of the post-industrial property. I'm less familiar with the character of some of the purple, but one of the issues would be if the state is involved, is the state willing to own and manage it? So that just to throw that out, that's another kind of variable in this.
Well, isn't a large portion of that purple that we see to the right where the words Cayuga Power are a very large ash landfill? That's my memory, that it's
Yeah, I think you're right.
huge,
Yeah.
huge coal ash landfill.
That's right.
It is.
Yeah.
I think Bert was referring to the land north, sort of north of the power plant proper in purple. That's kind of along the waterfront, if I'm not mistaken, Bert.
Right.
If we did get the 500 acres, do we, it wasn't clear to me, does that guarantee that it would work in the, an ideal scenario of becoming, I guess, state forest land is what we would want because of the tax revenue? Or would that be very iffy?
No, it's by prior agreement, as long as the state confirmed that fact. It's a formula.
Okay.
And CJ, I don't know if you remember from Danby, because that's definitely something I don't have at the moment, but we should look at what exactly is the revenue stream. It's not huge money, but it is if it meets the criteria in the designation, it's an annual payment, but I'll get back to you and look it up if CJ doesn't know what it is.
I also want to just jump in and say that while I didn't put this on the map, that forested land north of the Bell Station property is pretty much the same habitat with the limestone outcrop. And I think that probably is something that, should be on the table as a potential addition to come up to the 500 acres, because that is all undeveloped, with the exception of lakefront houses there. It's quite sizable, and I can update this and put that land on if it helps with the discussion.
Right.
I think that's not a bad idea. I know the person that owns all of that land very well. I think she'd actually be open to that if it was of interest. And there's no doubt being talked to by S-Power right now about building it all a solar farm.
Yeah, the way I would look at this is if, the town thinks it's a good idea and the land trust together thinks it's a good idea, that the DEC might react favorably, and it's crafting that solution. Because you're right, we were looking in the original concept, we were shy of acreage, we were looking to the north thinking that from a habitat perspective, it makes sense, but also administratively, that it is not too big a burden. One of the issues the state, as any land manager, is concerned about is whether the property configuration creates headaches because of like an unusual boundary or something like that. But crossing the road to the north, as long as it's a reasonable configuration, I don't think would be a big problem.
Andrea, do you have any input from the town board on how they would feel about this proposal?
Not yet.
No, I'm talking to Andrew Benson.
Oh.
That's okay. I mean, I don't want to talk for the other board members or for the supervisor. But I think they would be very interested in knowing all the different scenarios, because this is the first time I've heard the different scenarios. You know, I went to the meeting that S-Power presented, and it seemed all very logical, but then, you know, people started talking about what about the Bell Station and what about the forested land, but I don't think anybody knows all these details that have been thrown out and the different scenarios. And I would agree that it doesn't sound like an awful lot of money, the pilot for a forested area of 350 acres. And it sounds like lots of money for the $500 per megawatt. But most of us don't want to see the shoreline and the forested areas completely disrupted and ugly. The farmland, and being a farmer, I don't have as much problem with it because that land close to the lake is not very fertile. The closer you get to the lake, the stonier, the yuckier, the soil just isn't very good. And it's not being farmed organically, and we're an organic farm. So, and I think it would be hard. It's very hard to farm organically, but it's much easier if the soil is better. And that is not good soil at all. So it has to be enhanced a lot. And, but anyway, I think that this discussion is very good, but it should be also, the other board members should hear it.
Hi, this is Joe Wetmore. I'm in here with Karen.
Hi, Joe.
And I agree with Andrew. I think that exploring, keeping this a natural area is really an important thing for the town as a whole. You know, there's not much lakefront property that will ever become available again. And if we lose this, we lose it forever. And this is our one chance to preserve it for future generations. And I think that's a real priority for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree with Joe.
Yeah, this is Dave. I agree. I think, and I also think, you know, all parties involved would view this, you know, could be persuaded to view this as, you know, a win for everybody. I think, you know, the move towards expanding solar in New York, well, first of all, our committee, I think, has been basically in favor of that, you know, renewable energy sources, and not saying, well, we don't want it in our backyard. So, and as was just mentioned, the soils here are not the best in the township for farming, and we might be able to piece together this forest land too. So I think there's a lot of incentive to try to do both, and it could be really showcased by all parties involved as a community, you know, NYSEG giving a community the opportunity to get involved and being flexible, and a community doing something positive out of this whole solar movement.
Yeah, I think
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think the town's in a unique position where it has the power to basically dictate that land be used in the manner that, you know, everyone's talking about as a condition of approval of the solar project at large. I think it comes down to, from my perspective, really whether NICEAG, sees enough benefit from what they're going to get in payment from S Power for their portion of it that would be turned into a solar farm, as to whether or not they're going to be an amiable party at the table. But I think the rest of it is perfectly reasonable to sort of work out. Given the fact that if the state in particular passes some kind of ruling that says that the pilot payments from solar are only going to be $500 per megawatt, which quite frankly would be a shame. And although not in my best interest professionally, would be really bad for the towns that would have that forced upon them, because that's a very measly portion of the overall revenue generated compared to the cost of those kinds of projects, particularly at this scale.
My impression, maybe CJ or somebody could correct me if I'm wrong, but from the time that this was first brought up to our committee, I mean, the whole interest in the state in expanding these solar farms. At first, there was concern that it would really be done in a very pushy way. Let's put it that way. Here's what we want to do it. And we don't care what anybody says. We think this is the right spot. And that's really changed. NICEAG has been pretty cooperative, more so than we might have thought at first. Is that correct, CJ? I mean, do you have a feeling that they would be, interested in working with the community to come up with something that seems very positive for everybody? Or am I just being a naive?
Well, I think the interesting thing is, Andy has really graciously offered to speak with DEC about their kind of continued interest, or to try to evaluate their continued interest in the parcel. But I believe that Avangrid is now finally starting to talk to S Power. At least that's my understanding as of basically now. So I think that they're trying to find a way to, even if it's just adjusting those two lot lines in some way. The other piece of this that I think also makes that perhaps interesting to Avangrid is the potential payment from the county's conservation funds, which I just kind of briefly mentioned to Carrie and Tom earlier, which I think I had mentioned maybe last year to you. And I spoke with Andy about, and actually Scott Doyle at County Planning as well too, just to confirm that this was, this parcel is considered a natural features focus area, if I have that right. And then also a priority parcel. So the county would be willing to chip in up to $200,000 towards acquisition of at least part of the parcel. So that could, help. I mean, I understand the parcel is valued at much more, but there could, at least that would be something to offer. So I don't know if that fully answers your question, but.
Just to mention as additional background, we met with NICEAG's realty people and a representative of the governor's office when they were in town a year ago. So we've had pretty recent contact, and they're a large corporation. I'm not even sure if NICEAG or Energy East, I don't know if decisions, what level they're made at, but I think they are considering their options, haven't revealed what path they're going to go down, but we have kept them informed every step of the way. And they're very aware that the DEC has communicated directly to Avangrid their interest in conserving the site. So they know that too. And we've even updated them to say there is this possible exploration of a win-win involving both. So we're in fairly regular communications, just as a courtesy with them as they're the property owner.
So S Power was totally unaware of this Bell Station land as a future public access site when they made their presentation a couple of weeks ago here in Lansing. So I don't know how up to speed they are about this now, but that was all news to them.
Yeah, they're aware now.
Okay.
Just saying.
The one thing I wonder is when the full town board, is to look at this more carefully. I don't have a good handle from what we've been talking about so far, just, what the town might see as an actual dollar loss to them in some way, or how big that, what kind of magnitude that would be if there's a, when they're comparing like, profit margins or revenue to the town, how big of a difference does it make what happens here?
Well, I think we clearly need more information, but the other scenario is what would be the impacts of build out, because the highest and best use still is lakefront home development. So I mean, that has to be factored in as well. It's something I personally don't want to see, but that is also looking at different scenarios for the land. But clearly on the solar and the state payments for any state land, we can work with CJ and bring some additional information, at least on the state land piece. But we don't have enough information right now.
Yeah, and like Rob was mentioning, these things are being essentially debated live. So I'm going to send you a link to the recent DPS staff host community benefit program proposal, as riveting as that sounds. But in the details are what they are suggesting as direct benefits to the quote host community, AKA the town of Lansing. And they're proposing residential electric bill credits as well as the per megawatt payment. So, but we'll have to, like Andy's saying, you have to do the math on what the town is collecting from 1.97 million in assessed value at whatever property class it is currently versus, and also the other parcels, right? Most of the parcels that would be assembled as part of a project like this are probably mostly currently in ag exemption. So you'd really have to look at those parcels, what exemptions they're getting, what they're paying, and then compare it to a pilot in a host community agreement.
I want to point out the town has lost much more tax revenue than we're talking about since the power plant has gone down in value. And we've weathered that, and we've weathered that mostly because of increase in value of other parts of the town. And we're still seeing stuff develop throughout the town. And so I don't think that the amount of tax revenue we're getting from this piece of property is critical to the town's finances. And, I'd like to know what the actual numbers are, but I don't think this is the critical question of can we find money to cover that tax revenue. I think for me personally, the critical question is, can we preserve this piece of property that's somewhat unique, and we're not going to have another chance to preserve a bunch of shoreline and steep cliffs like this again. And it would be a real shame to have this turn into a bunch of really expensive houses, never to be turned back into the natural area that it is now.
I agree with that, Joe. And I would like to leave this meeting with some clear steps to how we should move forward. But Tom, I'm wondering if now would be a good time for us to hear from the Lansing Advisory Committee, the power plant future, just to round out the picture and then conclude with some concrete steps.
Okay, I'd like to add also, it's not necessarily the town taxes, it's the school taxes that I think are part of the consideration, and they're substantially more than the town tax. But I totally agree that this is a unique piece of property, and we should do what we can to keep it the way it is, more or less, in its natural state. Okay, so does somebody from the power plant committee, would they like to add something to the discussion?
So maybe look at the resolution.
We haven't pre-planned this. Who wants to be speaker? Rob? Rob?
I mean, I don't know what, I'm happy to talk, obviously, but
Yeah.
and I'm not short of opinions. So, but I don't know what more, I guess, specifically, we didn't prepare anything specifically to discuss with you all. But I think, maybe we could field some questions might be a suggestion. I mean, we're obviously kind of recently coming to some of the same sort of conclusions that you all are about sort of the use of this property, and obviously have this similar interests, aligned. So, I
So
mean,
Rob,
we could look at the resolution, but
one thing that might be helpful for the CAC is that we don't have much of the history behind the resolution, but we do have the resolution. And so perhaps if you could just very briefly summarize that, and let us know of anything that we should be aware regarding that.
sure. Let me pull it up here. I think if everyone has it, it's
I sent it out, I think, a day or two ago to the CAC.
so help me out here, the rest of my committee, please, for the important things that you feel I'm leaving out. But this was largely, I believe, based on some language that came out around a resolution supporting the data center concept that's been thrown around. So there's a lot of sort of similar language in here. Really, basically talking about really in sort of summary, I guess, what Lansing, what we believe, or at least what we were putting forth to the town board to consider as, Lansing's position around the concept of this large solar farm that's being contemplated in the area, and our eventual recommendation of support for it, given all of the obvious benefits to the tax base as a result, but in here also outlining essentially or at least highlighting some of the concerns, I guess, or interests that we believe are, I think, quite obviously from this meeting, very much in line with your committee on the preservation or conservation rather of the use of the Bell Station property, which I think maybe actually I realized typo in here and its spelling. So I think I mean, Bert, Hillary, you guys want to add anything to that?
Yeah, this is Hillary Lambert. After we had drafted this, our directive had been to send it along to the town board and see if it's of value for them to use, and with our support and guidance to express support for this project. But then we thought, wait, send it to the Conservation Committee first. Let them see it. Let them reflect on it on the basis of what your priorities are. See if you want to sponsor it, or write your own statement, or at least get a sense of one way to go forward. And so that's why it was brought to you before sending it on to the town.
Yeah, so let me give you my perspective on why now, what's this for, what is the process that this is a part of, and I'm not sure I understand it perfectly, but we understand that S Power wanted some support sentiment. This is not like a acceptance of the project because it's way too early, it's conceptual, but they wanted some support sent in to New York State ERDA, who runs the, and Rob participates in this often, I think. They run an auction to subsidize solar farms called renewable energy credits. They will pay for the renewable energy credits, and it's kind of a reverse auction. So S Power is going to bid into that, and they just want some support. So I think it's not an obligation of the town that I understand it to say anything at this point. It's not part of a formal process. It's not a public process. And I guess the purpose of the resolution, I don't consider it like endorsement of S Power's proposal. We just don't know enough at this point. It's sort of, so this would be, yes, we like solar power and we're willing to work with them. This is the way I think it should be sort of the intent of it, but not, there's a long way to go in the proposal process before we give it a rubber, or the town says, yay, approve it. I guess the last thing I'd say that what's not in this resolution, and I think this was first drafted and we edited by Joe, right? It doesn't mention, and I think it's kind of a glaring omission, the rules that have recently been, I guess, enacted into law by the town of Lansing regarding agricultural land and solar farms. So that, I think that should be a whereas that's probably in there. And I don't know how that would apply to S Power. But so anyway, that's about all I got to say. And I maybe got most of it right and some of it wrong.
I had a question.
I apologize, folks. I got to sign off, but I will coordinate with CJ, and my next step, just so folks know, we're continuing to develop what is just an option with DEC, but now that they may go on to the Cayuga operating property, I've had contact with them before, so I'm going to reach out to the folks at Cayuga operating to get a better understanding of the resources on their land, their receptivity to it. So I will come back to you all, hopefully with more information, and we'll work with CJ on some of the payment in lieu issue, but potentially putting lines on a map of something that, for consideration that we feel makes sense, but would require more analysis, but a conservation area that would span the property lines if Cayuga operating is supportive. So don't hesitate to contact me anytime in my office. I apologize, I have to run, but we will keep working on this, and happy to speak with any of you, from this point on, so don't hesitate to call.
Thanks
a
so
lot,
much,
Andy.
Thanks,
Thank
Andy.
you.
Appreciate it.
That was great. Thanks. Bert, getting back to your, what you were talking about. What was I going to say here? I forget what I was going to say.
I had something while you're thinking, Tom.
Okay.
Did your committee consider putting a condition in this resolution that would involve very thorough cleanup of the existing ash fill there?
I think there's I think one of the resolves, I don't have in front of me, I guess I should bring it up, but we talked about a comprehensive environmental review. I think there's a lot of uncertainty around, what's leaking, where it's leaking, if there's a leak. So I think what we ended up with was asking for a comprehensive environmental review. And so, and that really begs the question, that's certainly not the intent that be S Power's responsibility or even tied to their project. Their project could probably proceed without that being tied to it. But I think it's the opinion that should happen as part of the future of the power plant, not necessarily as part of S Power's proposal.
Yep.
And I'm not sure it reads that way.
Yeah,
So-
we discussed, making a separate white paper type statement about concerns, but there's an opportunity here to express concerns about problems with the site and just sort of to, to say, before things go forward with something new, other things need to be dealt with before. And there were many separate ways to talk about what needs to be cleaned up. But it was felt that to make a sort of overarching statement of needs a comprehensive environmental review seemed like a good way to summarize it for the time being.
Yeah.
Related to that, I'm wondering if it still would help to strengthen it, because to include something about the discharge, which is not an if, it is an is. We know that the discharge of the leachate is going directly into Cuba Lake, and we also know that there are fewer monitoring wells than seem to make sense. I'm just wondering if, as an example of what that comprehensive environmental review might be, that if we pre-charge the comment about the review with those two things that are known issues. We don't, yes, it's true, we don't know about whether the liners are leaking, yes or no, but we do know that the leachate is going directly into the lake, and we do know that there are monitoring wells that that's less certain how many more we need, but probably do need more. So that's my one comment. And the other comment to Rob is no, I spelled Bell wrong. You have it right.
Okay.
There's a later version of the map that I sent around that was corrected, and CJ and I now have both posted it to the chat. So that is corrected, and I will, in the course of this meeting, I'll also throw together a map showing that northern parcel.
Well, our group here was tasked with bringing back to our committee any possible changes in language that you might recommend. So I'm not quite sure of the etiquette here of how we proceed, whether you want us to, if you want anything further to do with this little resolution of ours, or if you as a group would like to make recommendations, as Karen has just done, on altering the language to put in a couple of specifics, for examples about a comprehensive study. I'm not quite sure how to proceed, but at the very least, we can trot back to our committee and report what Karen has said.
Yeah, and I guess I would take it a step further, since you have the line in there about the comprehensive environmental review, and you've pointed out that, yes, that indeed points to the coal ash landfill. I would put the word remediation in there, because I'm afraid that if we do not do it at this stage, it will not get done.
Right, but keep in mind, as Bert has said, this is, this is not, I'm sorry, this is, we're just sort of writing a letter of, gee, this look like a great idea.
Mhm.
We feel there will be many more opportunities in the future, and I guess we're sort of hoping that this group will work with us on those opportunities to make sure these things are done. But if you feel that it's really important for us to, lay it out from the get-go as to what we feel needs to be done before, with this site, we can do that. I think some would be uneasy on the town board that maybe we're trying to scare the solar
Mhm.
A.
Yeah.
I want to do that. So, a
I
balance.
don't think strategically that would be wise for us to do that right now.
I agree.
I do not agree with doing that right now. I believe,
agree.
as Karen mentioned, and, it's already been included, some mention, some allusion to the issue. But I don't think we should come out real strong, and they've got to do a whole cleanup.
Yeah.
Or we're not talking. And then we just got everybody's back up against the wall, and we're going to go nowhere with this.
I
Our committee is really
wholeheartedly
about,
agree.
finding new treasures of land to conserve. And I think this is a great opportunity to do that.
I just want to step in here for a second and note that I believe Ed is planning on calling a special meeting next week to deal with either approving or not approving a letter. So we really have a short time frame to get a letter to the town board to look at. So it's really this, whatever comes out of tonight's meeting is probably, or whatever 2 different letters are coming out of tonight's meeting, are what the town board's going to consider.
Oh, you said a letter. This is a resolution. You mean resolution?
Yes.
Okay. Well, if I was getting this in NYSERDA shoes, and if I was S-Power, it's really unclear what we're trying to say as far as the solar farm and how this remediation of the landfill impacts the development for a solar farm. So if the town board agrees with David, and I do, I think we need to make clear that it's that opinion or that whereas or that resolution is not tied to further solar development. It's not meant to, remediation of the landfill is not meant to be a contingency for approval, for the go ahead of solar farm. I think it's not clear right now that I don't think that that's what the intent is of even saying that.
I agree with David Wolf. We should not make this a big issue.
I think one of the issues that we have here is we don't actually know what their proposal is that they're asking us to say we like. We don't know which property it's going to be on. We've got a huge variation in size. We don't know which parts of the property they're looking at putting it on. We really know nothing, but we're being asked to somewhat endorse it. And I think under those circumstances, you have to put in the concerns because we don't know what the project is.
Well, I wasn't saying we can't include that, don't forget this is a concern of this area, but just not making it really, I just don't want the whole thing derailed, diverted into the discussion of the cleanup, which needs to happen, but I'm not sure this is the moment and this is necessarily that they would even be the responsible party to be expected to do that. So that's all I'm saying.
Right, and my feeling is that, again, that this is we're kind of providing the town board with a resolution, and my sense is once it's in their hands, they can alter it. Eh? I mean, they're not.
Bill Piper, I would just reiterate what line Bert has been talking about, which is from our hearing the presentation by S-Power to the complete board, and also when we separately met with S-Power in our small group committee meeting, the story was the same, that they were at the point that they would buy into this property, they would want to make sure they weren't inheriting any liability. And so our pressure needs to be put upon, it would seem to me, my naive understanding of this, at the point where the project goes farther forward, and you then need to really get a good environmental assessment done. And as Bert said also, this is not really commenting on the project except to urge NYSERDA to look favorably upon it as a reasonable idea. It really doesn't have concrete impact in terms of how such development would go forward or where the chips would need to fall in terms of toxins and pollution, et cetera. That would be a separate issue.
Getting back to what Bert was talking about in terms of the town solar law, I don't think that's a big issue because it's not prime farmland we're dealing with. And a lot of this solar is going to go on what's considered industrial. Joe, do you have any comments about that in terms of the solar law?
I think it's fair to say that we passed a solar law that's encouraging solar to be put on places like the landfill, lands that are not as valuable for other uses. It's just kind of, you know, part of the whereas package of telling the history of what's been going on.
Yeah, I don't think it's in the whereas right now. It should be added. And I guess, Tom, the only thing we don't really know where they're going to put it. I mean, and I think they talked about maybe going out 5-mile radius, not to the lakeside, but so we don't really know. I think it's just worth mentioning as a whereas that this exists, and you know it's good practice.
Well, the other thing is if it's 100 megawatts, the town's not going to have a big say in what happens because it'll be a state decision.
How is that specifically? Would it bypass the town planning approval?
Well, if I could speak to this,
Yeah.
it's hard to say whether Office of Renewable Energy citing, and I haven't read all 150 pages of the new rules that have just come out, but I'll circulate those to you all so you can take a look at all the subparts. But it's hard to say whether projects actually have to apply for site plan review alongside the new ORS process as well. The firms that I've spoken to, there's another significantly sized project called the Yellow Barn Solar that's planning to site in the town of Groton and the town of Lansing. And I'll send a little note about that too, because they're going to appear at the town board meeting on the 21st. They were suggesting that they might just also apply for site plan review, jump in the Article 23 queue, and when the new 94C siting regulations come out, the parts I'm going to send you are actually adopted into law, which I guess has to be done by this coming April. They may just jump onto that track, but TBD. I mean, no one seems to have a good answer for this, but that's what I know anyway.
So you're saying that you can't tell yet from the draft new regulations, the 94C process that's supposed to come in next April. You can't tell yet how much control or input a local community will have. There will, however, be an environmental review, right? It may not be mandated by the people and by public comment and so on, but oh, you don't know about that yet either. Okay.
Well, the timeline, and I can share that with you as well. What they view as their timeline is kind of this. They see this as all getting very expedited. You know, brownfield sites go from identification to permitting in 6 months. You know,
Right. Get rid of public comment. Things speed.
And they're going to use, you know, I think what's really fascinating about all this is that they're going to use, you know, the old Ag and Markets unreasonably burdensome standard, you know, now only applying this kind of the other way around, which is really interesting. So the question is, you know, is the town of Lansing's local law unreasonably burdensome in the face of these requirements? And we certainly made a significant effort into examining that based on that criteria before, of course, it went to the town board. So we'll TBD, stay tuned, everyone. Very exciting.
Yeah, I just want to give you a quick mapping update. I just got another 100 acres of forest from the lands across the street on that ridge from the Rainbow Station. That's good.
I'm wondering if there might be some way to include David's wonderful suggestion about combining the preservation of lakeshore land and the solar development as a great win-win example in this resolution. We have these two parts of the resolution right next to each other. Strongly feels that the forested lakeshore should be preserved, and that we like the idea of the solar. Can we do something with language to couple those to make it clear how nice that combination of things would be? I don't know.
Yeah, that does sound like a good idea. So there's still probably a little wordsmithing, or we could, yeah, I don't know whether we want to, this other group, the group that's joined us tonight is put a lot into the resolution, whether, maybe we shouldn't tinker with that. We can create our own statement or something and work on
Yeah,
some
I'd be happy to leave it up to you folks. It's just a thought.
Yeah.
That's a good idea. I bet a little bit of thought would make that look very handsome. Okay,
Yeah, I think it could.
thank you.
I think it's great.
Yeah, I think overall the resolution reads pretty well.
Yeah.
Okay. So shall we depart? Have you heard enough from us? Should we trot back and to our group and say we've got and sort of summarize what you've said and maybe wordsmith a teeny bit more? And maybe you're going to come up with your own statement?
Well, I could say that I don't think we're coming up with a separate statement as far as I know.
Right.
We're going to rely on your statement, which seems like we've tinkered with a little bit and it could go forward.
Well, why don't we, other people on our committee, shall we commit to a tiny rewrite and get it back to them quickly, or should they trust us?
We trust you.
Let's repeat what we heard, and Rob is actually has been the designated editor of this. So I've heard. Let me just say, and I'm happy to be wrong on this. I've heard one, we would add a resolution about, or no, whereas about the town solar law having, applying. We would strengthen the resolution on the comprehensive environmental review of the leachate to indicate there is some, no?
I'd keep that to a minimum.
Yeah.
Okay, so is it two?
That is, I think, as a comprehensive environmental review.
Does it go?
And it makes clear in the statement that that's not S solar. I'm sorry, S both guys. It's
Does it make that clear, you think?
I thought it did, but we could make that. I thought we said that.
Okay.
It would be clearer from my standpoint.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
And then I think the other one is we talked about adding the idea of getting 500 acres somehow as an, again, not S Power's responsibility, but just get it on the table that if there could be a combined 500 acre deal out of the two properties. Was that another resolution that should be added?
Why not?
Okay. All right. We could,
Well, that's
And
one.
the other
That's
thing was
one
just,
option. Go ahead, Dave.
well, the other thing was just talking, emphasizing a little bit the how basically we are in support of reasonable, our region contributing in a reasonable fashion to well thought out way of becoming part of the solar expansion in the state. And so from that standpoint, we're supportive of the general concept of what's going on here. And we're also very interested in expanding and protecting and conserving our natural areas, particularly those along the coast. And this looks like a win-win.
Great.
It has the potential to be a win-win, something like that.
Yeah.
And Karen has added some language too. Karen, maybe you can send that as an email or something.
I just added, a lot of that was based on some of the stuff that Joe had put into the original thing that he's drafted, and I just put that in the chat for him. But yeah, I can also reword that.
So has that been lost along the way, Karen and Joe, or is that somewhere else?
That
No,
was replaced by some language, which I don't know which one. Okay. That was replaced with the town of Lansing formally supports a comprehensive environmental review of any potentially harmful impacts to the town of Lansing and Cayuga Lake from prior operation of the coal power plant. And I think the difference here is it talks about the two specific things that are the known issues there, as opposed to a general what's out there, we're worried. And I generally like specific when we can be.
well, I think, it's the town board. So, and since Joe is on the town board, I think you get the last word. But I'm wondering do we need to be more clear to people who don't know what they're reading, that this does not directly affect S-Power's proposals? I mean, it might interfere with coal. I mean, it's clear, and they would, at their peril, come in and do something to put solar panels where leachate needs to be treated or something. But do we need? I think we need to be a little clearer that this doesn't impact directly a solar farm proposal.
Well, Carrie feels we should be clearer on that.
I really do. I think we have a history here of, untreated waste going into the lake, and it's still very murky from my perspective as to who's going to end up cleaning up the problems. In my younger years, I just didn't understand what the big deal was with a coal ash landfill, and now I do. So I actually like this original wording. I realize there's, in this conversation right now, people are very concerned about us not seeming favorable to the solar, the installation. But in fact, I think we can do both.
Well, yeah, I'm not saying we can't do both. I'm suggesting we need to do both. We need to add clarity on that this doesn't affect S-Power's proposal directly.
Can I ask, you're sending this? Oh, I'm sorry, John.
What if we were to say that comprehensive environmental review is necessary to facilitate the future use of the land? Wouldn't that make it sound that?
I think S-Power will just walk away at that point.
Yeah.
I just really worry about this. It's a little hard to write this by committee, at least late at night. I don't know.
Well, we're not going to try to write it tonight. We'll work on it and discuss it amongst ourselves and then send back another draft to you, I guess.
You're going to send, can I just clarify? You're going to send it to town board and then they're going to adopt it as a resolution, right?
Well, the town, that's where it's headed, right?
Oh, so they could amend it however, when you send it to them, it's just a suggested draft resolution.
Right.
So
yeah, I think the CAC should, perhaps maybe just make our own statement about we're generally supportive of this and some of the reasons why we see it as a win-win solution, and
I think that's great.
Leave it at that. That's what I would prefer.
And I also
I agree with David.
I think you guys did a really, really good job on it. I mean, you can tell from how carefully the words were chosen and the thought that went into it. And I know I don't want to minimize that at all, Hillary, because it's a big piece to get anybody's head around. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah.
Yes,
Well,
absolutely.
keep it in mind, once the town gets it, it's the town's, right? They'll do what they want with it, I think.
I emphasize what Karen said, because I think you guys really took the draft that I did and bumped it up a notch. You put a lot of really good detail in there, and I really appreciate the work you guys did on it.
Okay, that's good. Thanks. Made David very nervous.
Me too.
Yeah,
Okay.
I just don't want them to walk away from the deal, and
No. We
and
don't.
basically, and then also the town board, as us as a committee coming to them and they're going, oh, here, what are they going to try to derail this time?
Yeah.
So I think solar power, I'm all in favor of solar power in Lansing. And I'm also all in favor of preserving land. And I'm all in favor of cleaning up that site eventually.
Right.
But I don't think they all, you know, that I'm a little concerned about making it seem like the people who do the solar, it would seem to me we would have to know the details of, is there something they're going to do with the solar development that would make it impossible in the future to clean up that site?
Right.
If we knew that, then I could say, well, they absolutely can't go forward because they would prevent future cleanup of the site. But if they're not going to even be touching the area of concern, I don't see why it would necessarily be their responsibility to pay for the expense of cleaning it up.
Right. What we were told in a very vague way when we talked to the developers was, I think the quote is, we don't plan to put any panels on land that subsequently has to be dug up.
Yeah.
And we assume that the environmental assessment process will help us make sure that doesn't
Good.
happen.
Yeah. So that.
Okay, and so that's why, putting in environmental assessment process seemed
To
like
make sure that just reiterating that needs to be done. Yes, that
right,
definitely should.
supported
Yeah.
to them,
That's perfect. That's what I was trying to think of how to say better, but I think
Yeah.
you've said it right.
So we need the environmental assessment to help them decide on, when they do go to develop their solar panel thing, they know where they can develop and not. And yeah.
Exactly. That's what I was
I'll go
trying
with
to get at too. Yeah.
Okay.
Would it be a reasonable suggestion that we put forth the resolution to the town board, maybe with whatever other additions the rest of, our committee wants to add to it, and then your committee puts forth to the town any addition, you guys decide amongst yourselves if you think that there are any additional items that you want to put forth to the town, and you can do that separately as a way to sort of move forward.
I think we ought to just agree on this and not complicate matters with extra stuff coming in afterwards.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Overall- Go ahead. Go ahead, Hillary.
All right, I'm just saying it sounds like our job is to go off and wordsmith with this, but I think we need some kind of deadline and get it back to you and then get it to the town board, right, CJ? Town board deadline?
Yeah, my understanding is they were anticipating it, soon, like tomorrow, like. They know that there's this meeting tonight, discussing this between the two, the council and the committee.
Cool.
And so I think they want to set a meeting sooner rather than later, but, I don't want to speak for them, but, soon.
Sure.
Please.
I think this committee's come up with a lot of interesting ideas, and what you could do is just have some added resolves or whereases and just say, these came from the CIC, these came from the other committee, and that way it's understood what came from which, but it's just basically one document, and then we'll go by paragraph and say, this one, maybe not that one. And I think that way the work that was done by the first committee is preserved. The second committee has a chance tonight to put in some alternative languages, and then the town board will sort it out whenever we meet.
Well, can we pass a motion to say that at this stage, we are generally supportive of this resolution? The CAC? Okay.
Sure.
Do we have a?
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Okay, do we have a, did somebody move that?
I'll move that.
Okay, somebody want to second that?
I'll second it.
Okay, any discussion among the CAC? All in favor?
Aye.
Yep.
All opposed? All opposed? Abstained? Okay, we have a motion that we generally support this resolution.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Very good.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for joining us. This has been really a great discussion.
Really appreciate your work on this.
Yeah, and I think we all would really like to see that property conserved for the generations ahead of it, behind us, ahead of us, whatever.
Absolutely.
It really is an amazing piece of property.
It's fantastic.
Yeah. And the birds love it. It's a great wildlife spot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, very good. Good evening.
Okay.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
very much.
Thank you. Have a good
Thanks,
night.
guys.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move on to number 5, the natural resources inventory.
Has that been, I think, the last I saw, Robin did some final edits and submitted it to Tim, was it? And who is it we were supposed to submit it to?
Terry?
Terry, I'm sorry, Terry. And so I thought it was kind of a done deal. But maybe I'm wrong.
No, I tend to agree. I think it's pretty much ready to go.
We just need to resolve the scenic resources portion.
Yeah, there was that stuff.
Yeah, that can be a separate appendix, but I think it would be a good idea to get something to, the planning board and the town board that they could, a draft that they can look at. And we can say that, we're going to include as an appendix a scenic inventory, which we are working on right now.
That seems good.
So do we want to, CJ, do you want to send out the final draft version we have now and people can comment on it?
Well, doesn't Terry have the most final draft?
That's what I thought, but maybe I'm wrong.
Is that right, CJ?
I'm not certain. I could follow up with Terry and just say, hey, I haven't talked to him in a bit, so I can say hello and see if that's the most final. I know he was working on the layout and all that, and then he had some staffing changes too, so. Yeah, I'm happy to follow up with him and just follow up with Carrie and Tom to make sure it's the actual final, that I'm not confusing something.
Well, it's a final draft.
Or that's what I mean, the revised draft.
Yeah.
And then we want to get it to the town board, right? Or
The town board and the planning board.
and the planning board also.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was hoping that perhaps they could begin review, call it, October, November, then maybe, head towards, formal adoption, maybe towards the end of the year or first of the year with the organizational resolutions. Might be nice to have the January 2021 freshness of it, as it were.
So do we have a deadline of when we want to get this to the planning board and the town board?
Oh, well, I think there was one lingering question about the acknowledgements in the executive summary versus in the entire NRI. And I don't think anybody has resolved that. Robin, didn't you bring that up?
I sent around some edits on David's executive summary, but I am not clear on who needs to approve them or if Terry just stuck them in there. I never saw a draft after that.
Yeah. I was supposed to wait a week or so. The only input I saw was from you, Robin, where you made a few minor edits and very minor. And I just think I pretty much had, paraphrased most of or cut and paste the acknowledgements that was already in the main document and stuck it onto the executive summary because I thought they might be submitted as separate documents, but that should just go one place, obviously, in the document if it's all going to go in as one piece. So that's
I don't think that those the duplicate acknowledgements have been removed. I'm pretty sure.
So they should be removed. I thought they had been, but maybe that should be removed. Yeah.
Okay,
The ones that I wrote can be taken out. Can just stick with the
Right.
original that was there, as far as I'm
Yeah.
concerned.
so sounds like CJ, it needs to come back to the CAC for one more pass.
Okay, yeah,
then-
we'll just ask Terry for a final draft.
Kind of a
and-
final, fine proofing, yeah.
Yep. And then, David, do you just want to, since you did the executive summary, do you just want to yank out the acknowledgements?
I don't need to, anybody can yank it out. Just,
You might be anybody.
well, I don't think it's there now. I think actually it was taken out, or wasn't it? I don't
Okay,
know. Yeah, I'll look at it. Yeah, if
Okay.
there's 2 acknowledgements in the full document, if it's a complete repeat.
yeah,
I'll
there was
take out-
some tweak you had done also, I think that you liked better in your version. And so maybe if you don't mind checking it, that'd be great.
Yeah, I would just completely take out my version and put in the original as far as I'm concerned. I did something that I thought was a little shorter because it was an executive summary, and I thought it would be submitted as a separate document, and it didn't need to be quite as detailed as the original acknowledgements, but
It could
anyway,
be,
so-
it could be a part of the report, the annual report.
well, whatever. I just
We
really
could
don't.
repurpose it, do something,
Yeah.
multiple deliverables, right?
Yeah, I think if there could be places where you'd want to just have somebody might just want that piece, and then the acknowledgements should be stuck onto there.
Yeah,
Simple
and we
as that.
could grab them. We can grab them from the NRA.
Yeah, so I just don't think
Yep.
it's,
Good. Okay, so target date for submitting to the town board would be.
Maybe by the next CAC meeting, like have a final, a real final version, or the final draft. You know what I'm trying to say.
Yep,
Draft for circulation.
final draft.
CJ, if you want to speed it up, we don't even have to wait until the next
yeah.
CAC meeting.
Okay, yeah, we could at least get it circulated. If you feel comfortable with that, I'll reach out to Terry and I'll
Yeah.
just confirm that that's the final version that you'd like
Yeah.
to see circulated. And yeah, that gives people some time and.
Yeah, give us like a week or something, or 2 or at the
Yeah.
most, and we should be
Yeah.
able to get that back.
Great.
Yeah, I don't want to
Okay.
rush you. No reason to rush, especially, I foresee town board and planning board definitely going into some busy meetings. The last planning board meeting was over 4 hours long, so it's going to be kind of, Heather can attest to that. Yeah, so it might be challenging to, necessarily get to the material. And they're not having a second meeting because of the holiday. The second Monday, they're not meeting. What they would normally do is a kind of quote working meeting. So, if it ends up being November, no worries.
I just have one quick question, if this is a good time to interject. The protected open space segment of the NRI was looking a little thin, and I know that there was one that was sort of pending. I think it was the Sims parcel. Is that still a long ways away, or would it be worth putting in here some note about it?
We could reach out to Andy. We just, I could just say, hey, thanks for coming to the meeting, and just ask him where it is with the acquisition. It was funded as far as I know. I think they're just working out the deals or the details of the conservation easement and the acquisition of the remainder of the parcel. So let me confirm that.
I
Since it is
guess I just don't know
certainly
enough to know if it's,
Yeah, no. that's
yeah, if it's
perfect,
years away,
reasonable
then
question.
it's probably not worth. But as far as holding up the draft, I don't know that we need to hold up the draft for it, but just something to keep in mind. It might be outdated as soon as we publish it or put it out there if that's not going to be in there.
Yeah, thanks for bringing it
That's
to
good.
my attention. I'm going to try to do a thorough review of the draft to try to catch these things as best I can. So, but I'll ask Andy. He would know because it's Finger Lakes Land Trust's acquisition. So.
And then do we want to be mentioning in the body of the report that there's going to be additional information in the scenic resources appendix?
Oh, good point.
Yeah,
I
we-
just checked the table of contents. Sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just looking to see if it was in there somewhere, and I'm just was searching in the table of contents and searching for the word scenic, and I don't see any mention of scenic resources, so I don't think there's anything in there about it.
Would you be willing to add that, Robin, when we get the draft?
Sorry, my
And-
internet is pretty choppy. I would be happy to add it.
Okay,
Is there a particular place you think it should go?
I think you're as expert at knowing it as any of us at this point.
Okay.
Yeah, it can just be a
I'll
paragraph.
draft up a little paragraph.
Yeah.
That'd be awesome. Is now a good time, Tom, to just check in with folks about the scenic resources
Sure,
inventory? And
that's next on the agenda here.
where we should be housing it. Karen and I had an exchange about the photos, and I had said I could set up a Google folder for the photos, but then I realized, wow, we all kind of need to put our photos in the same place. So I've gotten a little foggy on whether everybody on the CAC can get into the town site, and CJ, I don't know, I think we might have had an exchange about this, but now I don't remember whether does everybody have a town email? And are we all able to store our documents successfully in the same folder? Because I was just,
I had asked for one and I never got one, and I kind of just forgot about it until you mentioned it.
yeah,
Me too.
I think I asked for one too. So, I mean, I'm not averse to doing a Google Doc. I just wanted to make sure it wasn't too rando that we had this Google Doc, and it would make sense to have some shared doc and all the photos, the original photos posted in a folder.
Yeah.
I think there is another step for completing the appendix, and that is assessing what we have. Because people have done ground truthing of the sites that they were assigned, but then taken additional photos of other sites that might even be superior. But we probably need, either we could address it at our next meeting if there's no big rush on this appendix, or we need another interim meeting to talk about, okay, so what are we going to choose for distinctive views in Lansing? That kind of a discussion.
I think, Carrie, a bunch of it is, I think, probably going to fall to me to organize a lot of the information that we've gotten, because, yeah, my bad. I got really busy with other stuff. And so I think that probably people were left a little bit on their own to figure out exactly what kind of information they were going to be taking. And I actually haven't even finished my area yet, and we're still waiting. Pretty sure I haven't gotten anything back from John Fleming, but there's a few people who did suggest new sites, and there may be a second round. So I think everybody seems clear on sort of evaluating what was in the inventory already, and then there's that next step of what do we want to add. And I think it's an intrinsically important part to what we put in that appendix, or what what our suggestions are as well. So I think it's going to be iterative. And once we take a look at what's really dropped out and how much things may need to change, I think then we can kind of move on. But I'm afraid it's going to be a multi-meeting process to really get it to where we need it to be.
Yeah, but I think it's going to be important because it'll serve as a good baseline.
Oh yeah. I mean, when they did this, I think it was an out-of-town consultant, and we've got so much, locally based, in indigenous knowledge of the area. It's going to be leaps and bounds more useful than it was.
Yes, and I don't think there's a terrible rush on it.
maybe the easiest way is if we could get all the information, including photographs, in one place, and then we can just all look through it. Otherwise, it's going to be really confusing and piecemeal.
Yeah, and that's what, John, that's what I can do once I get everything all set. I can put stuff up, and it can even be an interactive map, so we can have points on the map, and then you can click on it and the picture will pop up. So I can take care of that.
That would be fantastic. That would really make it possible to do nicely.
Yeah,
I think
and one of your maps would be great because we might just see some big gaps of certain areas that we missed entirely or something.
Yeah, and also redundancies and but both, yes. The map you sent that I used that had the points on it, if that could call up pictures too, that would be perfect.
Yeah, I can definitely do that.
So where should we put the photos then, or how should we get them to you or what? That's the remaining question to me, since I sent you coordinates and all that.
Yeah, and I've gotten them in different ways. Can everybody on the committee use the Google Drive? I think you can, right?
I think so.
I think not everybody could use Google Maps and see the interactive map on the on your mobile. But why don't we just make a folder that everyone can have access to, and dump stuff in, and I can set that up.
Let's try that.
That'd be great. So we dump our photos in there, and then could you also include the most recent version of Robin's spreadsheet? I can't remember if I sent one. I added some columns as to who the person was who collected the information, what the area number was. I can send that to you again, but
I don't even think I saw that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I don't remember seeing that either.
Well, I didn't send it to the whole group, but let me send that, and then I'll copy Robin so she sees what I did with her Excel spreadsheet. And you can just change it to your liking, but I haven't put my data in there because I thought, well, let's make sure we're all using the same one.
That sounds good.
I'll ship it to you.
Thanks.
Great.
Yeah, and Karen, if you would like a more organized way of entering things than what I sent you, for instance, let me know. I don't want to make your work more difficult than it needs to be.
Yeah, again, I think that's kind of, I'll have to eat that because I should have sent around a spreadsheet, and it's easy enough for me to copy and paste this into a spreadsheet. So yeah, ideally there should be separate columns for latitude and longitude, and it should be in decimal degrees, and I should have been much more specific, but I can handle it.
You're sure? Okay.
Yeah, that's what I do.
Well, we appreciate all your effort.
Yeah.
Sure.
It's a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
So on the agenda here, we have reminder of purpose under the natural resources inventory. And I'm not sure what that means.
I just added that because there have been emails circulating in Lansing about the Dollar General on Auburn Road to the north, 6 miles, I guess, away from the existing Dollar General. And anyway, so I sent a note to the town board and the planning board just saying, I'm speaking personally, not part of CAC, but do we need another one? And anyway, Joe wrote me back and he's kind of like, well, not too much we can do until the CAC establishes its priorities for view sheds and everything else. But that's on there just to remind people that if you have comments about Dollar General, we probably are not going to come out as a CAC, but you're always free to write to the town board and the planning board. And also it just puts in perspective what we're doing with the NRI and scenic resources, because we're basically building up to having a purpose for Lansing, preserving what we care about. So we don't have to spend very much time on that. I realize our time's getting short. So.
Oh, Carrie, that does remind me of something because I was interviewed by Tompkins Weekly and I don't even know how they got my name, but I was interviewed as myself, but the reporter asked me whether I was on any committees, and I did say I was on the CAC, which I think they printed in the article, but I wasn't, very clear that I think that I was not speaking for the CAC. So just so you know, I talked about, to the reporter, I talked about food deserts and I talked about open space, and it was mostly along those lines.
So that means we've been outed, eh? People know we, now we're in trouble.
Watch out.
I'm going to have to say goodbye. And this was one of the best meetings I think we've ever had. And I appreciate everybody's involvement. But I promised
good.
I promised I'd be off by now to someone. Okay. See ya.
Andra.
Thank you, Andra.
Good night.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
So from a planning board perspective, I think it's something that is allowed in that zone. RA is anything goes. But my feeling from what I've heard from other members of the planning board is that we are going to at the very least, try to make it not a typical general dollar box store. It's going to be aesthetically pleasing, or more pleasing than what you see by near the Rogues Harbor there, the one there. But other than that, I mean, it's an allowed use. And so you can't discriminate just because you don't like Dollar General. Is that right, CJ? Is that your understanding?
I think that's a fair characterization. The use is allowed subject to site plan review. And so site plan review is conducted by the town's planning board. As Tom is mentioning, there is some powers that the planning board has during that review. I think they're looking for, to get the best project, best materiality, best disposition on the lot, really use the site planning tools that are already vested in the planning board to get a nice project if at all possible.
Is there any provision that the town has about like redundant or duplicate businesses? To me, I tend to agree with Carrie. It's like having a Starbucks on either side of the road. Do we really need that?
Well, that's a good question. There are some provisions that can be brought into zoning. One of them is something like a floating zone, for instance, where you demarcate the number or the location of something that you'd like to see some of, but not a lot of, right? And then as soon as that zone touches down, then that limits that use everywhere else in the town. The town doesn't currently use floating zones. There's none currently in the land use ordinance. And that's also an interesting question because when there's already an existing type of use, that's assumed to be, and there's, say more than one or two or even more of, say, a retail store in a municipality, then it's assumed to be harmonious with. So if a new version of that came in and there's already existing versions of it, say the retail store, then it's assumed to be harmonious with the rest of the uses, if that makes sense.
I mean, the whole thing for me was not much to do with our committee, I don't think, but making me wonder about the socioeconomic situation in Lansing, actually, that this company would feel there was a need for two of these, a demand for two of these. So I kind
The
of
one that I
wondered
drive by is consistently very few people in the parking lot,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, that's, so I
Right.
don't understand it, but yeah, anyway, that's all I can
I
say.
think that part of their target market is Genoa, and I'm pretty sure that the IGA there closed years ago. And so really, if you live in Genoa or Scipio, you have to either go to Auburn or down to Ithaca. And, you know, it is a food desert, as you know, there, but a convenience store is not really helping things tremendously.
Yeah.
That's true.
Well-
One other thing, the planning board had discussed some about having a moratorium on box stores. But Guy Crow, the lawyer, basically said that you didn't have much ground to stand on with that. So, but, you know, Dollar General's algorithm says that's a good place to put a store.
I guess so, yeah.
Must be.
Well, if it's okay to move us on to the membership. Just a reminder, luckily CJ is on top of these things and was reminding me and Tom that Andra, Robin, Tom, and Karen all have 1-year terms. And it would be a good time now to be thinking about whether you would like to stay on and keep contributing to the CAC, because your terms expire on the 31st of December. And I don't know, CJ, what other committees do as far as the process, but I guess I'll just say for myself, I think people are doing a good job. We're just starting to get rolling, and I'm really hoping that people stay on. And I don't know how it works with whoever is appointed from the town board as a liaison, but maybe they'd go through a separate process. I don't know.
Those are the liaison appointments, as I understand it, are made during the organizational resolutions at the beginning of the year. So I assume, you know, Andra, if she wants to stay on, she could just say, yeah, I want to stay on as a liaison.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be too complicated if folks just want to renew. I think that's pretty straightforward, but I'll double check with the town clerk to make sure I'm not giving you misinformation about needing to reapply. There could be, but you'll love this. We've moved the forms online. So you can just submit an online application. Heather is smiling because we're getting there one form at a time. And so it will create just like a PDF, and it emails us to say, hey, somebody submitted an application. So it will be painless and paper free. So.
And so CJ, are we at our maximum of how many people we can have on? I don't have anybody in mind, but is there room for more people to join if somebody so desired?
That's a good question. I'd have to look at the enabling resolution that created the CAC, which was, looks like.
I thought it said originally 7, but then when more applied, they just went ahead and said that would be fine. That seems to stick in my mind.
Yeah, council shall consist of 5 to 7 members, all appointed by the town board, but there might be, I think the statutory enabling language in general municipal law might allow for more, but we have 7 is what the town board of Lansing decided back in, looks like January of 2019. So you could certainly ask them to change it if you wanted more folks.
Anyway, I definitely agree. We're just kind of getting into the meaty stuff here, and we're just getting our feet, just getting grounded. So I hope we have some continuation of the current membership for a little while.
I'm planning on staying on.
Oh, good, great.
Great.
I'm planning on staying on,
Oh, awesome.
unless you want to replace me.
Nope.
We
No,
don't.
no.
Okay.
And So just so we're clear on the process, you're going to find out whether people need to reapply, CJ. And if they don't need to reapply, can we just record in the minutes or something?
Yeah, it could just
Okay.
be, the members, wish to, stay on, and then the town board, if there's a question of how long the term is, I have to double check on how long.
That is written in the
They're
resolution.
staggered, right? I think so.
Yeah.
Yes,
I
it's
think they're
staggered. Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, great. Okay. So then we'll hear from Karen at a later date, maybe after she's made a few more maps and recovered. She's still thinking.
Oh, I didn't realize I was supposed to say yes or no. Yeah, I think I think so.
That would be awesome.
Yeah,
I would
so it would be a 2-year term then, because it's staggered. This was 1 and then it goes to 2.
I think so. Let me check, because frankly, the people who got picked for 1-year term, but this is just alphabetical order. So it was just what your last name was. I put everyone's name in alphabetical order, and then so B and E got 1. And
I was thinking of all kinds of reasons other than that.
no, that's it. I always just put members in alphabetical order on a resolution, and so everybody in the first part didn't. They got the short one. So anyway, okay. Well, I'll double check and see about the going to it. And if you preferred the 2-year now, starting now, let me sort that out. I will make a note to figure this out with the town clerk.
Thank you, CJ.
Okay, so we've taken care of that. Report from the CAC to DEC, EMC. So we owe them a report, is that right?
Yes, it's the same report. And last year, we have an example of it. I can't remember if I sent that out with the agenda or not. It's a fairly short report as to what we have done during the year. I don't know if anyone is interested in working on that. I would be willing to work with Tom and stay on that.
Yeah, sure.
Maybe we can get some input from you, CJ.
Yeah, sure. I sent you the one from last year that I prepared, and you could just riff on that a little bit. And, it doesn't have to be too formal. It just gets sent to the town board and in accordance with the statute, and then also to the EMC and DEC too. Yeah. So.
Okay. All right.
There's plenty to report. So.
Great.
Yeah.
Good.
Okay. Next up is CJ's plan of work. Does anybody have any feedback for CJ on that? So CJ, you're basically proposing the same amount of hours that you put in this year. Is that my understanding?
Yep.
So if anything, we would want more hours, but but we're perfectly happy with all that with the hours that we have.
There's no cloning
really
ability yet, so.
Yeah.
It's really, I think you've been in almost all of our meetings. It's been really helpful, really.
Yeah,
helpful.
yeah,
Sure.
you're integral to this whole process.
Yeah.
Oh, well, thanks. Yeah, certainly doing our best. We definitely have kind of created a couple more committees over the last year, so we're doing our best to staff those. But I see CAC as, home, your home is in code and planning, even if some other committees were to go elsewhere for whatever reason. To me, this, CAC, Planning Board and Zoning Board of Appeals are really kind of a fundamental to our operations. So.
Well, we're thankful for the time that you give us and appreciate the guidance as we bumble forward.
Yeah.
As you guys are doing awesome. And, you know, it's really great to see, you know, you run with the natural resources inventory, and I'm really glad we got that free, you know, no cost support from Cornell Cooperative Extension was really fantastic having
Yeah. that was
Terry, and
great.
then, you know, having Karen able to make the maps and just all your
Mhm.
different expertise, you know, you all bring something really, you know, a key ingredient. So, yeah, it's all you actually, you know, I'm just,
No, 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 no. You're a big part of it.
well, I'm happy to help.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, do you want to say anything about the planning report?
Well, unless you have questions, I will
You don't have to. I mean,
not keep you too much longer. I just did send out in between kind of the interlude period when the power plant committee was heading out of this meeting. I just resent the recap of the solar information that I had sent to the town board and planning board earlier this week. I kind of just let them know, you know, these two groups are meeting, some of the background to that. And so I edited that a little bit and sent it on, but it really is, you know, it's just such a fascinating time to be, you know, really at this intersection of all this, you know, long-term energy policy work. You know, some of you I know have followed CLCPA probably for, you know, years, and now we're seeing the Accelerated Renewable Energy Growth Act come to fruition. And, you know, Lansing's kind of, it's like ground zero. So, you know, thanks for paying attention to what's going on and really being engaged, you know, because you're going to help make a big difference, you know, as these projects move forward or not, you know, I guess we'll see, but
Yeah.
anyway. So if there's questions about that, let me know. Those new rules are out. They're pages and pages long. I've got to sit down and really read them with some quiet time. Heather can attest there hasn't been a lot of quiet time.
What is that? Quiet time?
Yeah, quiet time. That's cute. It's called working from home. So anyway, yeah, not much. If you have specific questions about the planning report, I'm glad to answer them. I've received some feedback on the work plan. I really, my intention is to hire a consultant to really help with the land use ordinance, to more to bring, to graphically enhance the land use ordinance, at least in kind of a first iteration. We subscribe to this snazzy new service called eCode, for which everyone is just learning how to use it. And let me send you the link to that. It's basically our entire set of local laws has been put online and codified into essentially a very easy to search and easy to use. And let me send that to you. A platform, for lack of a better word, so that you can search and see, find out anything, you know, look up zoning, look up, you know, dog permits, ethics, you know, different terms of office, you name it. So what I'd like to do is start to bring the zoning code to life, both in maps and both in graphical representations of the zoning, to really start to you know, move away from this kind of wall of text that only attorneys and land use professionals understand, to something that's more accessible to people, like, you know, everyone, and people who are interested in also economic development, who we want to see investing in the community, and kind of being clear about our expectations, right? I think that's where that type of code can really come in handy. So that's something I have planned for the next, you know, call it 12 to 18 months. So that's a big chunk of the hours put in, but I'm gonna hire it out. We did win some grants this year to pay for some work over at Town Center. We really need to do a whole area-wide stormwater study. And so we were fortunate to win money from the Park Foundation to be able to carry that out. But we'll apply for more money to do some of these graphics works too. So we're trying to save money though, you know, be mindful of taxpayer dollars too. So anyway, it's a very long-winded version of that, but
Helpful to know.
yeah. Yep, there's a lot of spinning plates, but we're doing our best.
okay.
And Heather's been a really great help, and she's really fitting into our little planning and code family. So don't hesitate to reach out to her, with
Great.
questions too.
Okay. So do we have any more issues that we would like to discuss, or would we rather adjourn?
I propose we adjourn.
I am
Yes.
so ready for dinner.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. This was really a great meeting, I thought. I think
Yeah.
Okay,
Thank
thanks
you.
a lot.
it's really excellent.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
Thank
have a good
you. Have a great
evening.
night. Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All right.